Good morning, everyone. We're going to start in just about a minute, so if you haven't gotten your coffee, go and get your coffee and come and take a seat. Well, good morning from St. Bart's. My name is Peter Thompson. I serve as the vicar and interim rector here, and whether you're joining us online at stbarts.org or here in person on Park Avenue, we're so glad that you're here for the forum where each week we have sacred conversations about the things that matter. And on this fifth Sunday in Lent, we're concluding our Lenten series on which we've drawn from the wisdom within our own community to learn about how to navigate transitions. And the transition that we'll be talking about this morning is one that so many of us are familiar with in one way or another, very powerful transition, the transition of grief. And to further introduce our guests, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, the Reverend Meredith Ward.
Thanks, Peter. Good morning, everyone. I am delighted to be here this morning with our fellow St. Bartians, Flora Ferrara, who is a co-convener of the grief group with me, and Ray Vandenberg, who is not able to be here. Ray is another co-convener, but in his stead, we are delighted and honored to have Keith Reinhardt with us, who is one of the lay leaders of St. Bart's, an active member for a long time, and a longtime member of the grief group, who are here to share with me their experiences of grief and how the group works and what happens in the group. So we're just delighted to be with you and share our thoughts as best as we can on this very complicated topic. Last week at our when we were talking about the retirement group, I shared with you the opening prayer that we use in that group because it kind of sets out some of the things that we aim to do and that happen in the group. And I'd like to do that again today and share with you the opening prayer that we use for our grief group, because I think it also kind of explains what happens in the group. So this is the prayer. Gracious God, you alone are the source of all life. May your life-giving spirit flow through us so that we may be ministers of your compassion to one another. In our sorrow, give us the calm of your peace and kindle our hope. And in your good time, let our grief give way to joy through Christ our deliverer. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. So before we launch into our conversation, just to say a few words about the group itself. As it sounds like in the prayer, we are just a group of people who have experienced grief in one way or another, and we come together to share our experiences and to support each other. We try to take a spiritual tack on the subject, and we ground our work together in prayer. This is not a professional grief counseling thing. That is a whole separate thing. So there are some people who feel that they need more in-depth professional grief counseling, which we can refer people to if that is what they feel they need. But that is not what we do in our group. Our group is just a group of people who come together and listen and talk. I'd like to also, again, I'm going to get to you guys in a minute, but I just want to also share one thing that I really love, that a member of our group who is as part of our online community, Nini Rossi, who some of you know, she is a member of the group, and she's shared with me this sense of what she gets out of the group or her experience of the group. And we're going to talk a lot about images and imagery and metaphors as a way of talking about grief. And Nini offers this beautiful observation. And by the way, you'll notice that Nini does not live in New York City. You'll understand why when I read this. Each session reminds me of the feeling of unexpectedly seeing a fox sitting by the side of one of the roads near me, and then whoosh, he's gone. But the memory stays. I think that is a lot like the secure sureness of faith as it grows. Moments of intense understanding that may feel fleeting, but in fact stay with us. We are so lucky in these groups to be the beneficiaries of the fleeting fox insights we receive and contribute to from our Zoom screens. So fleeting fox insights. That is a lot of what happens in our Zoom rooms, and I think really speaks to the quality of the conversations that go on there. So Flora and Keith, you've been part of this group from the beginning. Flora, you've been there as a co-convener, and Keith, you've been there as a participant of one who came because you were experiencing your own grief. Right. And things have evolved since then, but I wondered if you'd both just talk briefly about your own experiences of grief and what brought you to the group, Keith, and Flora, what you've gotten in the group so far.
Sure. Flora. So I felt extremely honored to be asked by Meredith to join this group as a lay convener. And my parents died nearly 30 years ago now, about 9 months apart, and living in England. And so I had experienced grief from afar because I wasn't able to be there when they passed away. And then I lost a brother about 16 years ago. So those were my sort of immediate closest experiences of grief. So when I came to this group, those experiences were quite a long time ago, but it was extremely comforting to come back to the group, to listen to other people who maybe had much more recent experiences, because the feelings are still there. And I think the overall feeling that I get from this group is comfort. It's an incredibly safe place. It's very reassuring and comforting to be with a group of people who feel safe to speak about their loss to others who nobody experiences it exactly the same, but everyone can identify a little bit with other people's stories, and it's okay to talk about it in this space, and it's okay to feel the way that we feel or don't feel or evolve as we go along. And I think it's just, it's also great to speak with other people in a way that speaking to other family or friends who mean well, but don't necessarily know what to say or how to feel for you. These are a group of people who are in it. And being in it with others is very comforting.
Well, thank you. I'm pleased to be here. And I want to say what a treasure we have in Meredith. When my wife died almost 3 years ago, she was right there for me in person, on the phone, with prayers, with recommendations. And I just couldn't have gotten through that without Meredith. Thank you so much. I've been a member of St. Bart's for a while. I just want to say a couple things about my wife that have to do with St. Bart's. My wife was Jewish, but she was Jewish light. I had to tell her when the holidays were, and Christmas was her favorite holiday. But she was very supportive and generous in terms of St. Bart's, and supportive of my membership and my involvement. Some of you might remember Bill Tully when he decided the rotten pews had to go and be replaced with chairs that we have now. I said to Rosalie, do you think we should buy a chair? Bill wants us to each buy a chair. And she said, what do they cost? And I told her, she said, that's kind of expensive for a chair. And she said, I think we should buy 8. So I said, 8 chairs? She said, yes, 1 for the 2 of us and 1 for each of the 7 kids. So if you see my last name on any of the plates in the chairs, we did buy. And I just wish that I could get some of those kids to occupy those chairs once a week on a Sunday or 2. The second thing was when St. Bart's celebrated its 100th anniversary on Park Avenue a few years ago. Each of us were asked to do something, whatever we wanted to do to celebrate that anniversary. And Rosalie's idea was, let's invite all of the St. Bart's parishioners to our apartment at Columbus Circle, and we'll invite the gospel singers from St. Gabriel's Church, Episcopal Church in Brooklyn, to come and give a short concert. We'll give everybody a cocktail and something to eat. And we could accommodate 80 people from St. Bart's, and we had a full house, and they were packed in the apartment. And the St. Bart's Gospel Choir came with their steel drums and everything and put on a 20-minute concert. And then we passed out song sheets so everybody could sing along with the choir. And it was amazing, an amazing evening. And so many people are still talking about it. This was the generosity of my Jewish wife and her excitement about St. Bart's and all the work it did. She was diagnosed, I was in a taxi cab, and a doctor, she had been treated with MS, and he called me and he said, she's very stable in terms of her MS, but there's a spot on her lung. I think you better look at it. It's an incidental finding. And so we did that, and they said, good to discover it now, early, we can remove it, and you'll be fine, which they did. And so she was fine until another spot occurred. And they said, we'll have to radiate that, it's too close to the lung wall. And so, fine again, good checkups, a series of ups and downs and hopes and despair. And then it advanced. And somebody said, okay, this was at Weill Cornell, there's a new procedure, and it's worked on several patients, and we can do that. So our hopes went up again, but it didn't work, and so hopes are dashed. And then Johns Hopkins was doing a clinical test, and Rosalie and I have endowed a chair in pathology at Johns Hopkins, and they said, you know, there's a clinical test that she could enter. And so once again, our hopes were up, but she could not be enrolled in that particular clinical test. And so during this time, I became a full-time caregiver, 24/7, and I was happy to do that. And I tried to pray, but it seemed like my prayers weren't being answered. And then I prayed that I could be a good caregiver, and I think I did reasonably well. And then finally, we prayed that she could go in peace when they dismissed her from the hospital and said, there's nothing more we can do. And she wanted to go, and so that prayer was answered. That's how I came to the grief group.
Keith, thank you so much for sharing that story of your life with Rosalie and her contributions to this place, and the joy that she brought you and a lot of other people in her life. We come together in this group and we just talk. And our prayer says that we are ministers to each other. We have 3 of us who sort of convene the group and open and close and offer our thoughts, but basically it's the entirety of the group and all the participants in the group who offer the ministry to each other. Can you talk a little bit, Flora? You touched on that in your opening remarks. How does that work, do you think, that we as a group are ministers to each other?
I think I think we all want to be seen and heard always in life. And this is a group, it's pretty intimate. It's sometimes no more than 10 people max. And we see each other, and we hear each other, and we listen. And often, many, including myself, don't say anything because listening is the most important thing. And so I think that's we're just there for each other. And sometimes there could be quite long periods when nobody says anything until when somebody's moved to share what they're feeling on that day. Maybe it's the anniversary or something like that. And or maybe it's a memory from a long time ago. I know sometimes something will trigger a memory for me, even with my mother being gone such a long time. But now with grown children, I feel, oh, I wish she could have been here at a wedding or something like that. And so I think it's just so wonderful to hear other people going through the same issues and the same sadness.
Yeah, thanks.
I just want to echo what you said about listening. So important. Listening is a sign of respect. Mm-hmm. And if you listen with intent to learn, not with the idea of wait till she's finished and then I'll say something like that, but listen with intent to learn and care, as the prayer says, that is, I think, maybe the best way to honor these people. And they can tell their stories, and maybe it triggers something, a suggestion. For example, one of my daily meditations is called a book called Healing After Loss, and it has a meditation for every day. And I thought the March 27th one was a particular apt for this session. I won't read the whole thing, just the tagline. It is amazing the way depression lifts when you are able to move out of your own concerns and do something for someone else, which is echoing that prayer. And I also partially remembered a book in sorry, that's my offering.
Don't lose that.
No, there was a verse in 2 Corinthians that echoes this prayer, and I copied it down so I get it right. 2 Corinthians 1, 3, and 4. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. Rather convoluted sentence, but Paul was not writing in English, so I'm given to that. But that echoes the prayer as well. And then listening and being vulnerable.
Yeah.
I think it's also so special to be able to speak about our loved ones. I mean, we speak about how we're feeling, but we speak about them as well. And I think very often we're a little bit loath to share that with others. They're uncomfortable, they don't know what to say, but this is a space that it's safe to say, he was wonderful, she was wonderful, I really was mad at him because he did that and I never got to say goodbye, or all of those different things. But I think it's a place we can speak of others, speak of our loved ones.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both so much for those insights. As we were preparing for what we were going to talk about this morning, we realized that one thing that has never been mentioned in the group, as far as any of the three of us can remember, are the so-called 5 stages of grief. No one has ever said, well, what about the 5 stages of grief? Or what about the 4th? We've never once mentioned it. And we don't talk about it, and it's not because we're not allowed to talk about it, it just simply hasn't come up. And we realized that our process together is really quite organic, and we've learned, I think, together that there's no right or wrong way to grieve. And this idea that there are these 5 stages that you follow and that they come in a certain order, I think for those of us who have experienced grief is a false idea, perhaps. So talk about that and how there's no sort of rule book for grief a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's, we read all these different sort of, landscape of grief or path, or, well, there's no roadmap on this path. And it can go, and you're sort of going blindly along and doing what feels okay at that moment for you. And it may not be the same for somebody else, but it's a step at a time, day at a time type of thing. But and it's okay to do it however it feels good for you, or as comfortable and as good as it can be for you. It's okay if it's not the same for your neighbor or your whatever. I think that it's, there is no roadmap, and you go along ups and downs, hills and valleys.
Totally agree. Someone described grief bursts, and they come upon you when you least expect. Something triggers it, and it's not linear, as Meredith said. I mean, sometimes you see those stages of grief in a U-shaped, but that's not how it happens. Anger can come at any point. Denial can still come. And and as was said, no one else can feel exactly. We in the group, we don't say, oh, I know exactly how you feel, because I don't know exactly how you feel. And no one knows exactly how I feel. But grief can be triggered by a memory. In these days, it can be triggered by an algorithm that presents a picture that you hadn't seen for ages. Happened to me this morning. The algorithms know what I'm doing. And so we have to, and also don't buy the advice that this will all pass. It won't. It will be with me forever. The memory of her and these grief bursts, for sure. But there are also some bursts of joy from time to time, and we cherish those and value those.
Keith, you talked about in your caregiving for Rosalie, and I think even after she died, the role of prayer or the lack of prayer in your life, or your inability, you feel like you weren't able to pray at times. Let's talk a little bit about, since this is a spiritually based group, how does faith or prayer, or however you want to talk about it, play a role in this process for you?
It's complicated. I believe in God. I believe there is a hereafter. I believe that somehow Rosalie is somewhere in some form. And I decided, because at the end of her memorial service, which Meredith attended, you might remember, I wrote a love letter to her. And I wrote about all the good times we have and all the travels we had, and said, I don't have time to recall all of those, but I'll recall one time we visited New Orleans with the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, and how much you liked the second line dance. And so I prepared a little surprise for you, and the chapel doors open. 6 jazz musicians enter, playing When the Saints Go Marching In, and laced up through the aisles and led everybody out on Madison Avenue. And so I decided a few months after she left, people suggested journaling, and I said, well, you know, I wrote her a love letter. I think I'm going to continue the dialogue. And so I went and got a journal, and the cover in her favorite color, engraved her name on the front, and from time to time, I write to her. And sometimes I even ask her questions. And so I think I want to continue that relationship. But I don't know why God didn't seem to answer any prayers when she was suffering so much. And she was suffering to the point she wanted to go. And I couldn't get an answer to that prayer. And so I don't know if you've ever read C.S. Lewis's book, Grief Observed. And he wrote notes while his wife Helen was dying. He didn't intend it to be a book. He just wrote notes about how confused he was, that God was not seeming to answer his prayers. And I identified with that. And the last thing in his notes, they later published the book under his own name. It was first published under a pseudonym. He said, when I lay these questions before God, I get no answer, but a rather special sort of no answer. It's not a locked door. It is more like a silent, certainly not uncompassionate gaze, as though he shook his head not in refusal, but waving the questions, like, peace, child, you don't understand. And I think I'm in that place where I didn't quite understand. And I'm not sure now. C.S. Lewis also surmises in this book, if God let her suffer so much, how do I know he's not letting her suffer now?
Yeah.
So I have, you know, faith, hope is the substance of faith. Is that right? And so I have lots of hope.
Yeah.
That we'll be together in some form, some way.
Yeah.
And that I hope she's in peace.
I don't know that I can answer as beautifully and eloquently. It is complicated. I think that sometimes all I can do is acknowledge the blessing that I felt that both my parents went very peacefully and without suffering, and I felt that that was a gift to me, and I'm very, very grateful for that.
A lot of times our identity is tied up with the person who we've lost, whether it's a parent or a spouse or a child or a friend, whatever it may be. That person was X in our life, and we've talked in the group about a sense of a loss of identity when we lose that person. Who am I now that this person is no longer here? Flora, was that an experience that you had?
I think certainly when my parents passed, now I'm the mom. And it was a time I had 3 young children. I was very busy with their lives, so maybe didn't actually spend a whole lot of time sort of dwelling on it. But I definitely think that when my brother died, my sister and I strongly felt like, oh, we're it now. We're the next he's from our generation. And when a sibling goes, I think that's even yet another different experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she and I talk about that feels, you have different, not exactly responsibilities, but certainly feel, you're the head of the families now.
Yeah. Yeah.
In my case, that was so true. For 2.5 years, I knew exactly who I was, what my role was, why God put me on this earth to take care of this wonderful woman. And when she left, I didn't know who I was. And I'm still working on that. And Meredith's been good to recommend a counselor, and once a week we get into these kinds of discussions. But I'm still at a loss, because that was why I was here. She was everything, and now she's gone. So yes, you're right. There is that crisis of self-identity. One thing that is highly recommended, however, after Rosalie died, my primary care physician said, I have one question: are you social? And he said, that is the most important thing. And as you know, Vivek Murthy, the outgoing Surgeon General, said loneliness is an epidemic. 1 out of 2 Americans are lonely. So that was one bit of advice, to start finding out who I am. But it's trauma.
Yeah. And loneliness is a part of the experience of grief. Even if we're not actually alone, there's a sense of aloneness in our grief. And I think that's one of the things that the group softens a bit. When we're together, we have those moments of feeling, oh, I'm not alone in this experience. You've both shared in our conversations sort of metaphorical ideas for walking through this journey, this landscape of grief, as you put it earlier, Flora. And you mentioned you and Jamie were just in Japan.
Right.
And you talked about something you did when you were in Japan and how you thought of our group in that experience.
So there's a Japanese art form called kintsugi, and it is the art of putting a broken pottery or china back together again. And the philosophy behind it is that the brokenness and the repair are in fact part of the history of the whole thing, and that it shouldn't be erased. You need to be able to acknowledge that brokenness. So when they make these repairs, they put the piece back together, but they actually highlight the cracks on the outside with gold. And so it's like, here is this vessel that has been broken, and it'll always have those cracks, but it is complete again, and it has this beautiful outside embellishment, a highlight. So it's sort of like you can be broken, you can be whole again. You will always feel that brokenness, but you can be whole again.
And the brokenness is part of the beauty of the object now.
Right.
Yeah. I just love that.
That's beautiful.
That's so beautiful.
That is beautiful.
And Keith, you shared in our last meeting something you picked up in from your business life. Talk about that a little bit. We'd love to see your drawing. I'm not sure it's going to be visible, but
I'll
we'll
do my best to
do the
make
best
it,
that you can. Yeah, with that, because that was really interesting too.
See if I can do that. Charles Handy was an Irish philosopher, author, and son of an archdeacon of the Church of Ireland. He was a business leader, and his specialty was organizational behavior, and he wrote a lot of books, and one was called The Empty Raincoat. It was helpful to me in business. And one of the things he described, and then later in 2010, he wrote a book on this particular subject called The Second Curve. And what he described was a sigmoid curve that goes like this. You start, you wobble a little. This can be a brand, it can be an organization, and then you start to thrive, and then you start to wane if you're not careful. And that was very helpful to me in business because you have to constantly evolve. I mean, you know, when I started as a copywriter, when you wanted to know the answer to something, you asked one of the 3 librarians who went through all the volumes we had. And a day or 2 later, we'd get an answer as opposed to Google or AI. So you have to evolve, but all the time keeping the values and the beliefs and the culture the same. It occurred to me not too long ago that Charles Handy's curves work for this process of starting a new curve. And so I'm going to hold it up for those online. See it. Let's see. Okay, see this curve? This is one curve. Okay, and then when the grief comes, when the death comes, you start a new curve. You start a new curve. And at that intersection, and this is me interpreting Charles Handy, you ask 4 questions. What do we keep? What do we add? What do we drop? And what do we change? And that's been helpful to me. What do I keep? I keep her picture on my phone. I still keep her favorite handbag and all its contents. I keep a pair of shoes of hers that has a particular story. I keep the memories, of course. What I dropped my 24/7 caregiving. I dropped making appointments for doctors and prescriptions and everything, keeping me full-time busy. I dropped all that. My daughters made sure that I dropped her wardrobe and her jewelry collection. What did I change? Among many other things, I changed where I live. I was in a big apartment at Columbus Circle, and it was so full of memories, and I didn't need all that space. So I moved within the building to a much smaller one. I changed a lot of other things. What did I add? New associations, new activities, travel that I wasn't able to do, and new pursuits in language and philosophy, and also making myself available to people. When you don't charge for your services, the demand is unlimited. And so I'm adding all of these activities. So I've found Charles Handy's curve for business to be helpful in this process as well.
That's great, and we've taken it on in our group as another tool for navigating these times. So thank you for that. I want to allow time for questions from the audience. Peter, did you have anything you want to ask, or I can?
Sure. First, I'll just make sure if you're in the room, you can raise your hand. Brian Johnson is here. He'll come around, collect your question cards, and bring them up to me. Those of you who are online, some of you have already submitted questions, but if you haven't yet, you can do so by emailing me, pthompson@stbarts.org. I will start with a question of my own. The Presbyterian minister Frederick Buechner wrote this chapter once, which he called Adolescence and the Stewardship of Pain. And in it, he reworked the parable of talents and had, instead of the talents, imagine that the talents are pieces of pain. And what do you do with that pain? Do you bury it in the ground? Do you invest it in some way? And I'm wondering, from the wisdom of your group, what thoughts there might be on how to best steward pain. Pain is something given to us whether we like it or not, whether we deserve it or not, but then what do we do with it? And I wonder if you all have talked about what to do with your pain.
You can go ahead.
I give into it.
Yeah.
I cry
Yeah.
and put myself in a place where I can just give into it until it subsides.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm successful at burying it.
Yeah.
And I think keeping the memories alive, like you have, Rosalie, on your phone, I think that's important too, to keep those memories strong. I mean, it's painful, but I think it's really important to think of our loved ones all the time. We have some of you may know my husband's a pediatric oncologist, and when he was treating patients when he was a new fellow, he had one family whose daughter sadly passed away. So this is 40 years ago. That mother has called us every Thanksgiving, virtually every year for 40 years, because it's her way of keeping that, what was a really painful time, but keeping her daughter's memory alive.
I do think that in time they diminish, and in time there are joy bursts as well, but
Yeah.
they never, ever go away.
Yeah. I think the pain of grief is a unique kind of pain, and it's complicated, as our group has discovered and shared. And even in the pain, as Keith has said a couple of times, there are these joy bursts that come with tears and sobs and everything else, but it's not only about pain. It's about those wonderful memories and the love that we shared with that person. So I think it's right to, I mean, we can't always go there. We can't always allow the tears to flow. Right now, if I felt tearful listening to my companions up here, and I've held it back because I'm sitting up here. But I also, there are those times when we must go there. We must let it out. Burying it, I think, is absolutely not is not good for us. It's not healthy for us.
There's some themes in the questions that have been submitted. One has to do with, I think, that the technical term in the literature is ambiguous loss. What happens when you have complicated feelings about the one that you are grieving? I think you spoke a little bit about being angry at the person you've lost. Has that come up in the group at all, and what wisdom do you have to share about that kind of loss?
Yeah, I mean, I think anger, guilt, regret are feelings that come up. Sometimes they're a major part of the grieving process. Sometimes they're just sort of a sidebar, and sometimes they're not a part of the grieving process. But it's certainly in there, and I think members of our group have shared, if not in a major way, moments of small regrets that they've experienced, missing an opportunity for a visit, or saying something, regretting something that they said, and those are things that come up in the process for sure.
I've been angry at Rosalie. I'm not willing to share the reasons or whatever, but I have been.
Yeah.
A lot of what-if moments, I think.
Right.
If onlys.
If only. Right. Right. Yeah.
There are some questions about grief besides the loss of a loved one. Estrangement as a kind of grief, breakups as a kind of grief. I wonder if you have any reflections on grief besides losing a loved one, and how that is or is not different from that kind of grief.
I'm grieving for our country.
Yeah, I think it is, I mean, I'll only speak for myself. I think that is grief comes up in all different aspects of our lives, around things like our country, or loss of a relationship, or loss of a community that we once were a part of. I feel like those are different kinds of grief, different quality. I mean, for me, it feels like it has a different quality, because on some level, it may not be permanent. It might be something that might change, whereas the loss of a loved one isn't going to change, and it's something we have to live with for the rest of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Question on practices that are helpful to you all and other people who are grieving. Mindfulness, yoga, you talked about prayer, potentially journaling. Are there other practices that you recommend to those going through grief?
Well, this little meditation book is every morning. I start with that. I try to, the practice I mentioned, the journaling, but also Meredith recommended a professional. On Zoom 45 minutes every Friday morning. I look forward to it. I can really dump on her so I don't have to burden my kids. I can be joyful in my conversations with them. And when I get to Friday morning, I can let it all hang out. So that's one of my practices weekly. Yeah.
I think for me, is kind of getting back into my body in whatever way that might be, whether it's exercise or walking, or just being present in my body, because grief for me has a power to just kind of overwhelm me with emotion, and I lose a sense of where I physically am in the chair. So I take walks, I take long walks, and that's one of the ways that just helps me kind of take a breath, clear the air, move out from under that cloud of whatever the feeling is, and move forward.
I also think, to an earlier point, be social.
Yes, yeah, stay connected. I mean, as I said earlier, the group is one way to do that, but we've said it many, many times in our forums here across all different topics, Peter, that this community is like here for us to just be in. And I mean, it's such a blessing for all of us, whether we're grieving or retiring or raising children or whatever we're doing or not doing. We have this amazing community of people here to participate in, and that alone is something to be thankful for.
Two final questions. The first, what is the relationship between grief and joy? Are you able to experience joy in the midst of your grief?
Oh, I think yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
that
Yeah.
you can I've certainly found new joy in changed relationships. My sister and I, she lives in England, we talk once a week, or at least now, and since our brother died. And that was something that we weren't doing before. She's older than me, but that is a joyful thing. And I have another friend who lost a child, and they always describe them, little moments like they're Chad winks. And they see something and they remember him, and it's a joyful moment for them.
Absolutely, and it often comes when I'm with my kids, and they'll remember something she said in her deep, graveling voice, and they'll say, I can hear her say that right now, and then we all have laughs about what she would do. and joyous memories of the wonderful times we had as a family. But preparing for this forum was not joyful. I'm anxious to get back into that mode.
Yeah. Yeah.
Finally, for folks who are interested in joining the group, what do they need to know?
So the group meets on the fourth Wednesday of every month on Zoom at 6 p.m. 6 p.m. Our next meeting is Wednesday, April 23rd. And you can find the link to the Zoom room on the St. Bart's website. And if you feel at all inclined to even just try it out, you would be very welcome just to sit and listen and join us and see if it feels right for you. You know what? It might not be the right time, but just to know that it's there and you can come and sit and listen and not say a word. You'd be very welcome.
And no commitment. Many people come once, then we might not see them for several weeks, and then they
Right.
come back. So it's as it suits you.
Right. Yeah.
Please join me in thanking Meredith, Flora, and Keith.
Thank you.
We're appreciative of all three of you and appreciative of all of you for being here. I hope you'll stick around and join us for worship, whether in person or online at 11 a.m. The forum will be on hiatus for 3 weeks. There's some things happening here at St. Bart's. We've got Holy Week and Easter, and because of the length and scale of those services, there will be no forum next week, and the week after. We'll be back on the second Sunday of Easter, 3 weeks from today, April 27th, as we welcome the clergy of our partner church in London, St. James's Piccadilly. It should be a wonderful conversation, so be sure to be back with us then.
Thank you for this.
job.
It's a gift. It's a gift.
Good.
Take the show on the road, except we don't.
Very moving.
Take the show on the road, except we don't.